My Govanen. Welcome to the Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and in this video I'm going to half seriously, half in fun, give kind of a rundown of what the different races in Middle-earth are like, and kind of do a sort of, which one are you type thing at the end. So I'm going to talk about what makes each of the races a little bit unique and give an idea of what aspects of human nature they kind of represent. Like I said, to some extent, this is just in fun because I'm going to exaggerate just a tad. I'm going to base it off of, what is actually true. But at the same time, the fun part is we can kind of look at some of these aspects and say, that's kind of more like my personality than the other three. So let's get started and look at some of the races. Starting off with elves, of course, who are the firstborn children of Iluvatar, if you've read the Silmarillion. Elves they're a little bit difficult to categorize in some ways, but I think some of the key things that come out if you really pay attention, the elves are the more artistic of the four races. They are wiser and more powerful in some sense, in that they have more capabilities. They're not more powerful in just raw physical power, but you do get the idea that they have the ability to tap into things that the other three races rather don't. And by the other three races, I'm not counting orcs and that sort of thing. I'm just focusing on elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits. So you've got the artistic aspect of elves. The other thing that comes out too is that they're constantly just enthralled with the world around them. They're very joyful about the world. They find it very interesting, and they find it, even though they tire of it over time, they still find every aspect of the world around them something to really take pleasure in and something to be interested in. And that kind of fits in with their the more artistic side of them, because it kind of feeds that ability to do artistic things. And I'm not talking about just art in the sense of paintings and music, although you do get the idea that is some of what they do. I mean, one of the contrasts between elves and dwarves, and here I'm skipping ahead a little bit, the dwarves make things, but they're not really making them for beauty's sake, whereas the elves are definitely more focused on beauty. You get things that are made by the elves that are constantly described as being very beautiful, or Rivendell and Lothlorien, the places that they inhabit, being very beautiful. Mirkwood, not so much, but that's not the elves' fault, so we won't put that on them. But you definitely do get the idea that they're the more creative, expressive types in the world of Middle-earth. So let me go ahead, since I've already mentioned dwarves, let me move on to dwarves. So dwarves, as I mentioned, are also very much into making things, but they're more about tools, things they can use, practicality, that sort of thing. You do get the idea that they're more engineers than artists, let's say. The other thing, of course, is dwarves tend to be very possessive, greedy about, things that they've made. And they're even to some extent covetous of things that other people have that they want. And that's accentuated to some extent by the rings of power that were made for the dwarves. It kind of makes them even more extreme in that way. But even aside from that, you do have the element of, they're very much into, this is mine. And that's why you get Thorin and the other dwarves in The Hobbit. It's not just about revenge against Smaug. That's our treasure, darn it. We're going to get it back. The other aspect of the dwarven character that I've always found interesting, Tolkien says in the appendices to The Lord of the Rings that once a dwarf has made a friend, they are very, very loyal, but it's hard to make friends with dwarves. They don't really share their language with other people. They don't really share much of anything with other people, but once you're their friend, it's pretty much a lifelong thing. They will die for you. And you can see that in Legolas and Gimli's relationship. Gimli not really thrilled with Legolas at first, but when they actually do become friends after meeting Galadriel, Gimli is very, tied down to Legolas as a friend for the rest of the story, and very strongly so. So that's another aspect of dwarven, character, and that kind of fits in with their general stubbornness, and they are very stubborn. So that's kind of a general overview of what dwarves look like. Now let's look at men and hobbits, and I'm going to look at those together because it's kind of hard not to. So, of course, I've been talking about all these different races as representations of certain aspects of, real humanity, humans in the real world. Men and hobbits in Middle-earth are even more like just your regular men, but they play on different angles of that in different ways. So hobbits, as to the extent that we get a good view of hobbits in their own realm, Hobbiton and the Shire, they very much, and Tolkien even kind of says this, they represent kind of the average guy. They're, not people with power. They're not people with a lot of, huge ambitions, or, people who are going to make a huge mark on the world. They're just the guy who's trying to get along, make his way in the world, farmers, yeomen, that sort of thing. They do have a gentry type class, but it's not in the way that you would see like a upper class in the real world. There's no nobility, there's no hierarchy. They have an elected mayor, and that's kind of the only official position they really have. So hobbits, you definitely get the idea that they're more, these are just your average blokes trying to make it in the world and get along with people and that sort of thing. Whereas men, they in the novel seem to more represent what men are like in positions of high stress, high power. Basically they're kind of more at the extremes. So I mean, the men that we see in the stories, Aragorn, Faramir, Theoden, Éomer, all these different people, they all have, they wield some level of power, or they have some level of influence because of where they are in the world. The only major exception to that I can think of is Butterbur, at the Inn of Bree, the Prancing Pony Inn, that is. And even he is said by Gandalf to have some importance in the town of Bree, or maybe it's Aragorn that says that. But either way, I mean, you get the idea that even though Butterbur is, he's not exactly the sharpest tool and the sharpest knife in the kit, he's a man of some importance, and he has some sway in his own little world. So you do get the idea that men overall represent something different than hobbits about humanity. They're kind of man at the pinnacle of stress and power. And I say stress and power because you get a lot of dichotomies. Theoden and Denethor, Faramir and Boromir. You get a lot of these dichotomies where you see men who have kind of the same challenges put before them, but they end up going down different paths because of their choices. Faramir rejects the ring, Boromir tries to take the ring. You've got Aragorn also as a counterpart to both Boromir and Denethor. He is the wise ruler, as opposed to Denethor and Boromir, who are different in their own, unique ways from that. You've got Theoden against Denethor, who, you've got Theoden is the one who listens to Gandalf. He has to be rescued, more or less, by Gandalf, but he does listen to him, and that turns out well. Denethor is too proud to listen to Gandalf, and that turns out to his ruin. But if you pay attention, you've got this theme running throughout. All the men that we see, again, like I said, except Butterbur, who doesn't figure heavily in the story, but all the men that we see other than that, they have really important roles to play, and because of their position, they have a huge influence on things. Whereas the hobbits as a rule don't have a huge influence on anything. The hobbits that we have in the story, Merry, Pippin, Frodo, and Sam, they have huge influence on the story. Pippin rescues Faramir. Merry helps Éowyn defeat the Witch King. Frodo and Sam take the ring to Mount Doom. You've got really important things done by hobbits, but it's precisely because they are, and this is, where Tolkien is kind of a genius, he calls them the little folk versus the big folk. And that's a metaphorically accurate statement as well. The whole point is that little people, people who aren't that important, can do really important things. It's just a matter of being in the right position to do them and making the decision to do it. So Frodo, he's not in a position of power. He just does what he knows he's supposed to do, and as a result brings about the destruction of the ring. Merry is not in a position of power, but because the Witch King just doesn't even really consider worrying about him, Merry is able to actually do something and help Éowyn defeat the Witch King. Pippin just happens to be in the right place at the right time as far as saving Faramir, but he has to act. He has to do something in contravention of Denethor's orders. He has to enlist other people to help him, but without him being there, it wouldn't have happened. So we can see that they can accomplish big things, but it's not because they're big people. It's because they're choosing to do the right thing and they just happen to be in those right circumstances. Whereas the men, pretty much all the men we see are already in a position to be doing big things. Other than Butterbur, pretty much everybody we meet is essentially some form of nobility, because you've got Theoden, Éomer, and you've got Denethor, Boromir, Faramir, Aragorn. They're all, stewards, kings, relatives of, they're all in those high positions. So you definitely get that distinction there, and that's why I wanted to talk about them together, because they're kind of like poles, polar opposites on that spectrum, but they're both just kind of representing men as men, not particularly a specific type of man, because there's a huge gamut that it runs, but just kind of how they are in the world, not so much what kind of person they are, but kind of their position. So that wraps up kind of my discussion of the 4 races. Now let's kind of take a look at, who are you? So for myself, I would say that I am probably a mix of dwarf and hobbit. There is a very big part of me that likes nothing better than to just have a normal life, do nothing terribly important, even though I have interests in important things. That kind of puts me in Frodo's position, I guess. Frodo very much likes Bag End, but he is interested in the higher things going on in the outside world. And, to me, it would be a perfectly good idea to just settle down, live a life, not get involved in anything, just leave me alone, just let me live my life, do my thing. The dwarven part of me is that part that's, I mentioned earlier, that dwarves, when they make a friend, they are very fast friends. That's basically me. I don't make friends very easily because I'm an introvert. It's hard to kind of crack that shell, but once you get there and I've kind of determined that I really like you, then I'm going to stick up for you to the bitter end, pretty much. So that aspect is dwarvish. And then the other aspect of my character that's kind of dwarvish is the practical mindedness. I am not an artsy type at all. I can't draw worth anything. I tried learning a couple of instruments, never had the patience. I am a much more functionally minded person. I am more interested in what something can do for me and how to make it work than I am beauty for its own sake. I admire beauty for its own sake, but I'm not very good at doing it, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So those are the ways in which I am half dwarf, half hobbit in this half joking schema that I have set up here. So what about you? Tell me in the comments what you think you are, as far as, which aspects of the different races you have, and let's have a conversation about that. Tell me if you think I left anything out that I should have mentioned in terms of, mentioning the different characteristics of the races as well. We can talk about those. Also, if you want to learn more, if you want to have other ideas for fun topics like this, do let me know in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you had a little bit of fun with that. Hope we do get into a fun conversation in the comments, because I think this is kind of a, like I said, it's half joking, but I do think that there really is some element of truth to the schema that I've kind of gone over here, because Tolkien he's not writing allegory, but he is writing applicable literature. There are things about his writings that are true, even if it's not true about a specific event or individual. So anyway, that's my take on that. But if you do enjoy the video, please do give it a like. Please also share it around. And if you want to learn more about Tolkien, or if you want to, and by the way, Tolkien, I mean not just Middle-earth, anything about Tolkien. I've done videos outside the Middle-earth realm. But if you want to learn more about Tolkien, then subscribe to the channel, or you can follow me on Twitter at JRRTLore. Until the next time, I'm the Tolkien Geek, signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namaste.